Dear colleagues, dear friends of ITB, thank you very much to representatives of Oman. We liked very much this presentation and the discussion about authenticity and the relations between strong tradition on one hand and futures, technology-driven futures, and with this key aspect of humans and the traditions of people in the destination. We'd like to continue now with the next session with this challenging title, What are the destinations of the future? I guess that this is a title for the whole day, and probably for the whole ITB convention. Nevertheless, we will focus on an aspect, a very special aspect, which will now be presented by Google and Deloitte. We will have a 10-minute presentation of a new study, and after that we will discuss together with a representative of Singapore on the stage. And so it is my pleasure to invite Guillermo Albizuri and Gilabert Jorge on the stage. Guillermo Albizuri, he is the managing director of Google in Spain, in charge of travel, finance, education, and startups verticals in Spain. In travel, he helps large hotel chains, airlines, and OTAs grow their business online and expand internationally through digital marketing. And Gilabert Jorge is partner at Monitor Deloitte and leader of strategic consulting for the tourism and hospitality industry in Spain. The floor is yours, I would say. You will start with your presentation. We are very, very curious.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
We have the clicker. So, hi, everyone. My name is Guillermo Albizuri from Google, and I'm here with my colleague, Jorge Gilabert from Deloitte Monitor. And we are very excited to present today here in ITV a piece of research that we have been working on for the last few months, trying to develop a long-term perspective on the evolution of global travel. We have been looking at feeder markets and destinations to understand a bit better the future flows and volumes on global travelers on the world. There are three things that I wanted to share as context, of this research. First is that we acknowledge how audacious it is to try to forecast the long-term future. As Yogi Berra, a famous American baseball player, he used to say that it's very tough to make predictions, especially about the future. But when we look at the data, and we have looked at a lot of data about the industry since the 1950s, what we saw is that although it's impossible to predict one-off events and conflicts that are going to affect the industry in the short term, there are intrinsic long-term trends and correlation with economic data that has been true for the last 50 years that actually made predicting what's going to happen in 10 years relatively easier than what is going to happen in the next 2 years. Secondly, we think that the time, I think for this one as well, what we did with that data is we have combined Google data on user trends plus a lot of external data sources, and we leveraged the expertise from Deloitte on modeling to actually, did this modeling, and you would think, we would feel confident about, some of the conclusions that we have from the study. The second thing I wanted to say is that we think that today, now is the right time to actually engage in this strategic, long-term reflection. As an industry, we just came out of the toughest period in history with the COVID years where it was a lot of uncertainty. It was impossible not only to predict the following year, but even the following week. But we have come out of that crisis stronger than ever as an industry. And there is emerging user trends that we see that make us very optimistic about the future of the industry. As an example, I'll give you one. We see that users, they are much more, they have stronger preference now after COVID to devote a big chunk of their time, their income, and their savings to experiences and travel than to the purchase of goods. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that we think that this research is going to be very useful for your businesses and for your decisions you need to make, strategic decisions for the long-term growth of and health of your businesses. So no matter whether you are a hotel chain that is trying to decide where in the world to build the next hotel, or you are a DMO that is trying to adapt their destination to make it more appealing for the emerging, bigger feeder markets, we believe that this is going to be a useful piece of information for you. And we have created a small video as an intro of this research, so if we can put the video, I hope you enjoy it.
Google and Deloitte have joined to examine and understand the historical evolution of source markets and destinations and to draw a 2040 vision of it. The tourism sector is growing at a rapid pace, where the number of global inbound arrivals doubled around every 15 years. What will the global travel market look like in the future? At this moment, we are navigating an economic, social, and technological transition that will create a new canvas where transformation will be critical for future success. Aware of the large number of variables influencing the future of tourism, our vision for 2040 is based on predictive models that incorporate a set of variables with the highest capacity to explain tourist flows. In the past, we've seen that the number of people traveling abroad is closely tied to the middle-class population. With the middle class expected to increase by over 2 billion in the next 20 years, the tourism sector is poised for significant growth. In addition, the models predict that by 2040, the number of trips worldwide will continue to increase around 2.4 billion, which is approximately 936 million more than in 2019. The top 5 source markets are expected to expand their market share, reaching 42% of outbound departures versus 34% in 2019. And Pakistan, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Mexico stand out as new source markets entering the top 15. From the destination perspective, the top 5 are expected to reduce their market share from 30% to 20%, showing destination diversification. And Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and United Arab Emirates stand out as new destinations entering the top 15. This is only the beginning. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Guille, for the introduction. I'll go through the slides kind of quick so we can have the discussion after. But we wanted to share also some tips on how we did it, why we did it, and what are the outcomes that are going to be expected of this report. So as Guille said, we're trying to project 2040 for source and destinations, source markets and destinations. And we have tried to reach globally more than 185 countries. We have leveraged several experts like Raúl from Barcelona, like other C-suite experts from top companies in the sector. We have used advanced analytics with our data scientists and data engineers in order to build these predictive models. And we have also leveraged Google data with more than 100 billion Google queries, more than 90,000 data points from history, and more than 3,000, just a few, about future-looking data, because we were very selective on the future-looking, since not all of the data can be projected with good representation. So as you have seen, the tourism sector, international travelers have doubled every 15 years, since 1975. And this trend, as you have seen in the video, will likely continue. In order to define or to draw the future, you need to also understand, or we need to also understand the forces of change that are going to be accelerating or reducing that future for the sector. The middle class growth, as Guille said, and as we said in the video, is a big driver of the future of international flows, but also the distance from the source market to the destination, that is also going to create the new destinations, the capacity that is built, infrastructure that is built in different countries, technology and AI. We talk a lot about the real-time translation. That's going to reduce some of the barriers and it's going to accelerate international tourism. ESG, sustainability, is a trending topic, is a key thing to solve or to manage in order to ensure a bright future. The competitiveness of the pricing, the destination investments and strategic plans. Some of the destinations are doing massive investments and changing the landscape and the value proposition. That's going to create a competitive advantage for them. Safety and security and the cultural and leisure assets that the different countries have. And also the geopolitical relationships with the visa implications. You saw it in the video. We're going to be projecting this or publishing this in a month. But as we said in the video, we're trying to create the number of source markets, so the size of the source markets for 2040. For example, India. Is India going to follow the same growth as China? Population is quite similar, and they are like 20 years behind from a tourism outflow. What's going to happen with mega countries like Indonesia or Brazil, which both are close to 300 million, or 200 million Brazil and almost 300 million population in Indonesia? What's going to happen with China? What is the ceiling? Are they going to reach 300 million? It's going to be 200? What's the ceiling? How many Chinese are we going to see? And what's going to happen with the US? The US, they have a low frequency now. That is growing fast. And is it going to continue growing, the number of trips per traveler from the US? That's going to be the key driver for more mature countries, the trips per traveler. How is that going to evolve? And that's going to draw 2040 from a source market point of view. When we look to destinations, is going to France continue being the leader? They've been stagnant a bit for the last 20 years. Are they going to continue keeping their #1 position? What's going to happen with the US? Are they going to reach 100 million tourists, international tourists? What's happening with the Middle East? Are they going to beat the Mediterranean as the top destination? Or Thailand is going to continue growing at the same speed as they have been growing in the last years? These questions will be answered in the report. As we said in the video, we expect a bright future for the sector with 900 million more international travelers by 2040. That has massive implications into the industry and into the performance and profitability of the industry. So just stay tuned. More to be coming in Dubai. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was what in German we call Aufschlag. So now some things are said in a very, very clear way. Thank you very much for that. And so I'd like to welcome also Ki Kwan Bo. Thank you very much. He is the Executive Director, Exhibitions and Conferences of Singapore Tourism Board, where he oversees the healthy development of the exhibitions and conferences events in Singapore to support the needs of Singapore's key industry clusters. And I think he is the right person also to help us in interpreting that what the Google and Deloitte study was telling us. And I would say we go straight forward. Ki Kwan Bo, thank you very much again. So what is your impression now when you see the slides? What would you say? So first ideas about that, what is only at the beginning. The two authors were telling this twice. We are only at the beginning. What does it mean for Singapore?
We are selling ice to Eskimo. I've been in this business for 20 over years, and I think we're not even close to the potential of travel. Travel is innate in every one of us, to be able to see the world, experience culture. And one thing we learned during COVID is that the digital interactions that we have is not enough to substitute travel. So the very reason that prevents us from traveling, which is COVID, once it's removed, our business came back stronger than before. And I think what was shared was that people now want to interact more and at the price of buying goods. And that's a really good insight, because you don't know what that you're missing until it's taken away from you. So to be able to see something, hear something, smell, eat, touch, taste, interact, these are things that it will take some time before the digital sphere can replace. And I think that was a good reminder during COVID that we were denied of these things, the ability to go out to interact with people, to listen to a concert, and to talk to friends face to face. And I think these are experiences that is really important for traveling. And the report basically affirms our business, and I'm excited to see more of the report. Of course, Singapore is not in the top source market or the top destination. We are a small country. It takes less than half an hour to get from one end of the country to the other end. So I think based on Jorge's modeling, we will never be able to make it to the top 15. But I think we are quite close there. I think we will probably be in 20 or maybe somewhere in the 18 or 19. But Singapore is some of the factors that basically drive tourism are not just things good for us. They are essential for our existence. So being open to the world, plugged into the world, being accessible to the world, and being a safe destination, these are things that are not only important for Singapore, they're critical for Singapore's survival. So I think I'm looking forward to hear more of the report, but it's certainly something that we know, and for us who is in the business, this is a really strong affirmation as well. So thank you for the research.
Yeah, thank you for this first insight and evaluation, your review about the research. Let us go back now to the research itself. So as a researcher, I would say, so what about data? We know that data will be the main drivers for this kind of development. But on the other hand, so coming back now to data sources, how did you manage data? You were talking about predictive models. Just a short overview, how it came to these results.
Yes, well, that's a technical question. So we had a team of 3 data engineers. Mm-hmm. They were working mainly with Python, and there were different ways of model the countries depending on their maturity stage. Because there are some countries that they are starting to become mature, or we call them beginners. You will see it in the report. And in order to project them, that's not linear. There are some other, so the key driver for those countries is the growth of middle-class population. Mm-hmm. Another thing we saw in data is that travel, as you said, Mr. Po, is addictive. So once you start traveling, the frequency increases. So some other countries, we needed to model the changing behavior and the frequency that is going to be changing for the travelers. And for example, in the US, you have a 0.3 trips per person in the middle class. Is that going to become 0.5 or 0.4? And we use some other models in order to project that. So we had to segment the countries, and depending on the segmentation, we had to use different models to project it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And there is another, I think, interesting hypothesis we are trying to test. There is, so you have, in travelers, you have mature travelers and emerging travelers. So travelers that they have been traveling for a while, and travelers that they just started traveling. And you have mature destinations, that the destinations that, the Paris, London, kind of the first ones that come to mind when you think about traveling internationally. And then emerging destinations, which are the new ones. And one of the things we're testing is, mature travelers, they have already gone to mature destinations, so probably they're going to emerging destinations, and there is a more diversification of destinations, new destinations that are becoming popular. And then emerging travelers, they tend to go first to mature destinations, because they want to go first to the kind of the big ones before. And I think it's an interesting dynamic also that we are continuing to explore, because then they will inform some of the dynamics that we will be seeing in the incoming years.
You were talking about major destinations, so that was also my impression. So what will happen with all these experienced and major destinations we have? On one hand, everyone can be happy because you said we are only at the beginning, and looking at these growth rates, like a rocket going up. So I would say major destinations in the first moment can be satisfied and say, well, this is a good development, because we will have tourism in the near future. More and more tourism will come up with these new emerging countries and destinations. But on the other hand, you were talking about Paris, but let us talk also about, let me say, middle-sized cities and places and destinations. What will happen with them? So is it a question of adaptation? Is it a question of complete re-engineering of the destination idea? What is your impression about that?
So I think the richness of the types of travel is going to increase, and we're seeing a diversification on the reasons for traveling and the purpose of traveling of the different segments. So depending not only on the origin country, but also on the preferences of the traveler, they prefer to go to experience these mega destinations, or they prefer the countryside or the sea. So we see an increase in diversity, and since the pie is growing so much, we see opportunity for most of the destinations that do their homework and are put in the map in order to attract the segments they want to go for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, and also, so building on what Jorge was saying is, if you're a destination, I think sometimes, the building the capabilities and the reputation in some of the kind of new feeder markets, it takes time. So I think it's a very important thing also to understand how the feeder markets might change and how you adapt your experiences to the kind of the affinities and the preferences of those feeder markets, which I think is something that takes time, and that's why we think this long-term perspective is something that would be useful for those kind of strategic decisions that they need to make.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to Singapore now, you underlined an aspect which was also discussed by the study, namely the resilience, so the situation after the crisis. All in all, the health crisis, COVID, in a way, allow me to say, was also a helpful moment, just in order to reposition and re-engineer and rediscuss management systems. Can you go a bit more in detail? So what has Singapore done, just in order to be prepared for this destination developments, which we now learned from the Google and Deloitte study?
All right, so just to let you know, this question Professor Ray never gave me. So it's really, he threw it from the left field. One thing that we learned from COVID it's different from SARS. So we had a big one in 2003, that was SARS. SARS was very deadly, but it was also very short. This one was long. And of course now, we look back, there were a lot of lessons that we learned, but when you are in the middle of the fight, you really don't know when the tide will be turned. So one of the important things that we did was to make sure that the industry didn't die. That because there was lack of business, once the industry, the partners and the businesses disappear, it's a lot more difficult to get them back up. Case in point, Singapore Airlines, we know that, we don't know when air travel will begin, the big way to carry people from destination to Singapore. So we had to basically retire some planes, park them, in Alice Spring in Australia. But one important thing that we knew, it was very difficult to replace the pilots. And pilots, if you were to stop them from flying for a while, it would take time for them to get licensed and to be able to fly passenger flight again. So during the meantime, Singapore Airlines basically deployed our pilots to fly cargo flights. Still a plane, you're still flying cargo. In fact, cargo business basically did very well during COVID. But more importantly was when business came back, we didn't have to look for pilots. The pilots were already there. They were ready to then take on the flights to serve our key major destinations. And that was a key ingredient why our business was able to come back and come back fast. The other one was we did a lot of work to help our businesses carry on their day-to-day operations. Right? We know that tourists weren't coming in. We gave wage supplements. We tried to then engineer events within the country so that businesses can carry on their day-to-day. Not every one of them survived through COVID. Some pivoted, changed to other business, but we were able to keep the main bulk of them alive. Our hotels, we turned them into quarantine facilities so that even during COVID, when tourists weren't coming in, our hotels, we managed to use the rooms, the facilities, and turn them into quarantine facilities to help our business carry on during COVID times. Again, when business came back, our hotels were ready. And I'm glad to say that none of the hotels in Singapore went bankrupt and folded. So these were some of the things that we learned, and very useful lessons, because the next time any health crisis come along, that will be one of the key things that we'll do, keep our business alive. And that's just one of the things that we learned. And we were fortunate because the very moment we were able to open our borders for businesses, we came back, and we came back rather quick.
Thank you. Great answer. Yeah, it's very, very important to underline this resilience. I referred to the future track discussions we had yesterday. Basically, I could say it's all about technology on one hand and net zero and sustainability on the other hand. In your study, you were talking about the destination strategic plans as one variable which will impact the destination of choice for travelers in 2040. So what would you say, in what way destinations and upcoming destinations, but also major destinations, have to develop their strategic plans, considering these future-oriented issues?
Yes, so we believe that it's not only the plan, it's also the investment behind it. And if you want to accommodate massive amounts of tourists, you need the infrastructure. So many of these emerging destinations or new destinations do not have the infrastructure yet, or the infrastructure is not big enough. So either you plan long-term, ensure that you build the basics in order to accommodate incremental tourists, or there will not be capacity to absorb it. Probably the price will be very high, but the volume will be much lower, which is also a strategic choice that many destinations may do. No? But we believe that without the infrastructure, you don't have the starting point in order to accommodate the tourism flows. Mm-hmm. For that, you need the strategic plans.
Yeah. We discussed, when I think on ITB conventions of the last years, many times we discussed about over-tourism. Did we overcome now this age of over-tourism, or will it even start now? Or we resolve with technology all these problems we had in the last years?
Remember, we're from Spain, so we know what is over-tourism. But I think before COVID, there was a bad press about tourism because we did not appreciate the value that tourism was delivering to the country. It was once we saw how the country was operating without the tourism that the population started to embrace again the tourists, and the small businesses needed the tourism. So I think destinations that were over-tourist receivers understood the value of it. It doesn't mean that probably quite soon we'll have again the bad press of over-tourism, because some concrete destinations are overloaded, but I think it will be more a conversation, not once against the other, but how to create more value with the right amount of tourism. So it will be more an equation rather than a fight, if that makes sense.
In other words, we have to manage numbers and capacities in a much better way. Technology will help us to do that on one hand, and on the other hand, sustainability and net zero objectives at the same time. So we have clear focus how to transform and how to manage the transition towards sustainability. At the beginning of your study, in fact, you were underlying this aspect of the transition on political, societal, and economic level.
Yeah, and I think another change I think that came out of COVID is that, for example, from the traveler perspective, so sustainability, we really saw a shift in putting that, top of the list, and and they value very importantly the sustainable travel, and we can see from our clients how this has become it's something that takes time, and it's the same as technology infrastructure. All these battles is going to take time, so there is no quick fix that you can do in a few months. And I think both from the kind of companies' perspectives and also from the destination perspectives, investing time and a long-term plan on how you can transition that, I think is going to be critical, because I think it's top of mind for the travelers, and it will take time to actually make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Really, really interesting. Looking also at the emerging countries, such as India, Brazil, Indonesia. So for Europeans, completely more or less new markets. Well, beside the fact that India has a stronger tradition in some destinations of Europe. So new clients, new tourists, new understandings, new mindsets, and new leisure and cultural assets, as you underlined also, discussing the variables. So, a last question, coming back to Singapore. Ki Kwan Po, you are responsible for conventions, for MICE tourism. So, we were talking a lot about business. You, in fact, did the same. So, business will remain, or will even increase, especially in Asian countries. So, a last word about the future of the convention tourism, of MICE tourism.
What we learned during COVID was, at the end of the day, business is really what gives people that lifeline, because you need to extract value out of this. And business travel has always been very resilient, right? World trade flows basically enables the whole world to function. And our convention, our exhibitions are platforms for this marketplace to take place. So the business side of travel will always continue, and I think that will be something that won't go away. But we need to do it better. Aviation will generate around 2.5% to 3% of carbon emissions in total. Some say that it's really low compared to other forms of activities that we do. But don't forget that the privilege to be able to travel only sits in a very small segment of population right now. So we need to get it right. We need to be responsible. We have been basically rolling out roadmaps with our industry partners to make traveling to Singapore a sustainable one. In fact, by 2026, all flights leaving Changi Airport will need to use sustainable air fuel. And in order to help to generate that demand, there's going to be a levy that's going to be imposed on every traveler coming to Singapore to basically use and to make the airline use sustainable air fuel, which is not very expensive. It's about 10 euros, which is almost the cost of a cup of coffee and a croissant. But that is one of the things that we want to do to help pivot towards a more sustainable way of traveling. And we believe that the future is bright. We will be able to find the right way to do so, but we need the whole industry to move alongside with us. And we are very excited to see what the future brings.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I give the floor to Dirk Rogel, a big applause to this podium.